Don't wait for a tragedy in your life to strike for you to get after your life. Prioritize yourself and your goals and your aspirations. The hardships that we experience, they teach us so many lessons. They teach us so many things about ourselves. They give us time to stop and pause. No matter how hard they are, you will come out on the other end a better person.
What specifically would you recommend someone do that means they don't have to wait for something big to happen in order for them to get started?
Here's my take and suggestion.
Welcome to The Edge of Possible, the podcast dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cameron Atlas, and together, let's unlock your edge. We often think that in order to achieve extraordinary things, we need to add more to our plates. But sometimes the most powerful transformation happens when life forces us to stop, let go, and take the weights off our chest one by one. That is exactly what we're exploring with today's guest, John Bernatovicz. John is the founder of Willory and author of the #1 best-selling book, HR Like a Boss. But he isn't just a successful entrepreneur and a family man. He is someone who has fundamentally reshaped his life through the fires of hardship. After losing both of his parents, his biggest fan and his biggest hero, in the span of a single year, John had to navigate a profound identity shift. In this conversation, you're going to hear the raw, unvarnished truth about navigating the messy middle of grief and growth. We talk about why you shouldn't wait for a tragedy to get after the life you really want, the power of intentional relationships, and the specific habits that John uses to lead with empathy and strength. If you've ever felt stuck, or that you've been waiting around for the right time to make a change, this episode is a must listen. That's coming right up here on The Edge of Possible. John, great to have you, man.
My pleasure, Cameron. This is a delight. I'm so excited about the work you're doing. I'm also excited about seeing you on stage at one point in my life. That's on my bucket list, just so you know. I want to see someone who can share wisdom while playing the piano. That's amazing. And then I can't wait to have this conversation. You're an inspiration to me, and I know many others, and I'm delighted that you invited me to be a part of this.
Oh man, that really means a lot. I do appreciate it. Now, when it comes to some of the defining moments that we have in our lives, I think we all have these, right? And I want to start here because as we'll get into it, there's been some big ones for you in your life. They tend to go on to shape the trajectory of it. Right, to really shape the trajectory of it. So maybe the first question I've got for you is, what has been the biggest lesson that you've learned specifically about these kinds of moments for someone who's maybe going through it right now or are going to go through it at some stage in the future?
No matter how hard they are, you will come out on the other end a better person. That's the simplest way that I can share it. Or at least I pray that you do. For those listening, the hardships that we experience, they teach us so many lessons. They teach us so many things about ourselves. They give us time to stop and pause. And oftentimes when you're in the midst of hardship, you can't see the other end because it feels so real and raw. Whether you've lost a loved one or gone through a divorce or lost a job or whatever the case might be. And what's the cliche? When one door closes, another one opens. I think that there's a lot to be learned in the spirit of hardship. And I'll just paraphrase what my therapist told me in the midst of going through one of these struggles. John, it feels like you got multiple 50-pound weights sitting on your chest and you're laying on your back. You can only take them off one at a time. You can't remove them all at the same time. And you have to give yourself grace and love yourself in the process. I know it's easier said than done, especially in retrospect, but it will get better, I promise.
Why do you think people want to take all the weights off at once? Is it to remove the pain immediately because they don't want to experience it? Like, what do you find that is?
Because it hurts. It hurts bad. And we as human beings, whenever anything hurts, you put your hand on a hot stove, you remove it really quickly, or something in our life isn't going as we want it to. We want to correct it. That's why we go to chiropractors or doctors, or we go on ChatGPT when we have an ailment and try to figure out what's the quickest way for us to get rid of this. It's the societal way. It's immediate gratification. It's immediate remedy of challenges or issues. And I think it's just easier to try to get it to go away. That's quite frankly why I think a lot of people fall into vices. drinking or
Yeah.
drugs or other habits, because the pain of what you're dealing with is hard to deal with. And if you don't do it the right way, which the right way is really up to the individual person, but oftentimes we can get redirected into other spots. And I think it just hurts really bad. And the work is difficult. And there's no formula for it. There's no read this book, go A, B, C, D, and you'll be better. It just doesn't work that way with hardship and loss and grieving. It's all very personal and it takes time. But at the end of it, you end up being a better person because you had that experience and you got through it, which is the primary thing as a human being. I think we all need to recognize we're in the midst of these challenging times.
Do you think that trying to take it, using your therapist analogy there of like taking the weights off and like taking them all off at the same time, do we potentially lose the lesson if we're trying to remove it immediately, or if we go to these vices, for example, like, are we potentially missing out on the lesson because we're pushing it down or whatever's happening there?
I think so. You're not dealing with it. And we all know what happens when you don't deal with a issue that exists in your life, or someone in your family that's a pain in your neck, or you have a colleague at work that you're struggling with, or a boss you don't get along with, or fill in the blank of whatever it is. When you don't run toward that issue and address it and at least get clarity on it, doesn't mean that you're going to get answers that you like. Your family member may say, I never liked you from the day you were born, because that's what they felt. Doesn't mean they're right. Or your boss never thought you were a good fit for the role you're in, and that conversation turns into you no longer having a job. I think the fear of the outcome is what prevents a lot of people from actually addressing the issue. They're afraid of the response or the reaction to the thing. And think in many cases, as a result, we don't take the time to unpack the things that we need to do. We just try to mask them or not think about them or not verbalize them. And then at one point in your life, whether it's a week, a year, a decade later, that wound is going to resurface some form of fashion. And my guess is if you haven't dealt with it, it's going to come in a flurry when you least expect it.
Often it comes as well at, you said, least expect it. And often we're dragging those unlearned lessons and patterns that are playing out underneath the surface into our next relationships, right? Whether that's a romantic relationship, a business relationship, or otherwise. And I really like what you said about the fear of the outcome, because I've had this many times before and with clients as well. It is the fear of the outcome when you actually go and do the thing, you have the tough conversation, face it head on. So often we'll come out the other side going, oh, it wasn't actually that bad. We've just made it out to be something much bigger in our minds. Why do you think we do that?
Because the brain is an incredibly powerful thing inside of a human being. It's the most wonderful, in my opinion, thing on the earth. At the same time, it's the most evil thing on earth. And we've experienced and seen both extremes. And I honestly think that we tell ourselves a lot of stories about how this conversation, or how difficult it's going to be to deal with my grief, or how hard it's going to be to unpack that first 50-pound weight that we have to get off of our chest. And we build it up in such a way that we're afraid of it, or we give it way more power. We give it way more amplification. We make it way worse in our head than when it actually is in reality. Now, as we all know, sometimes those conversations go way worse than we ever anticipated. But at the end of the day, I'm one of these kind of guys that I want to know. Like, I want to know what it is. I don't want to not know. And I don't want to guess in my brain. And when I find myself guessing or telling myself stories, quick lesson that I do, if I'm standing up or if I'm sitting down, I rub my toes in my shoes or in my socks. Stay present in the moment you are right now. You haven't had that conversation. You don't know how Cameron's going to respond when you tell him, I'm so jealous you can play the piano. I wish I could play the piano myself. And Cameron's response is, John, you quit piano lessons when you were 9 years old. You gave up on it. You can't be good at a piano, playing a piano if you don't work at it. Like, you can't be afraid of addressing those issues head on and be afraid of what the response is, because in all honesty, you can't control any of that. You can't control what Cameron's going to say, what your colleague's going to say, what your least favorite uncle's going to say. You don't know what your boss's response or reaction is going to be. You can only manage how you're viewing it and how you respond to it. And that is the nasty part about being a human being, is that it's just, we just don't know, but we want to control so many things. And I think all too often, I know in my own personal experience, that's when I get myself in the most trouble.
Has there been moments where you've gotten yourself into big trouble then with those moments?
Yes. Oh gosh. Well, a couple things. I'll just say recently in my life that navigating through a lot of unique opportunities and challenges simultaneously in my business and personal life. I've got a son who turns 18 very soon, which that's a lot for your oldest kid to become an adult. Like, it's like, holy cow, wake up call. And as a young man, he's finding his way and he's finding himself. And that means testing dad and mom in the spirit of that. And he's just navigating through life. And that's been tough. That's been tough, to be honest with you, because I've thought back, and I'll never forget this, Cameron. I used to coach my son and his friends on their soccer team, their youth soccer team. And I'll never forget, there was a game my son played. My son's name is Will. My firm's name is Willory, Will and Mallory. So I've invested all in. Super proud of my son. He owns his own little lawn service. Cameron and I were joking about it before we got on the show. He's super successful for a 17, 18-year-old kid. Anyway, we're driving home from a soccer game. Coach B is driving the car, not dad. Coach B, because that's what the kids called me. And I hadn't switched off of Coach B to dad when I was driving the car. And my son didn't give his full effort in the game. And it was obvious that he didn't. And Coach B told him so and shared my thoughts and gave him a strong Coach B speech. He got real quiet, got home, told my wife how mean I was, started crying. And it came to find out that he didn't want to play soccer. I was playing soccer because you were the coach and my friends are there, but I really don't like soccer. And I thought to myself, it was one of those moments where I was trying to control the way my son felt and the amount of effort he put into something in his life that he didn't want to do himself. Now, I don't have to tell him to go work in his lawn business because he loves it. And that's something he wants to do. Every once in a while, I'll raise my hand and say, hey, Will, can I come help you? Because I can actually spend some time with you and ride in your truck and get to know your buddies and stuff, because that seems to be the only chance I get to spend time with a 18-year-old kid is if I go work with him. That was a major, major lesson. In my work as well, there's been a couple of examples, and I recently was in church, Cameron. I was half not paying attention to the announcements because that's how my brain works. I have a very short attention span. I'm reading through Bible and verses, and I came to Luke 22:42. Not my will, but yours be done. And there's a lot of things in the world. I know there's a really great book out there called Let Them. That's just let them do their thing. Let other people do what they need to do, because you can't control how they react, they respond. I can't make my son love a game that he doesn't love. And the lessons that I learned in letting go of those things and letting them be has been, how dare I say, significant in my own self-awareness and my own happiness. And it allows me to navigate through challenging times, knowing what could I have done better to manage through that situation myself, and how can I release the others that are involved in it to do what they're going to do, because at the end of the day, that's what human beings are going to do.
I think that last part that you mentioned as well is, if we don't provide them with the opportunity, someone, whether it's in a workplace or it could be a family member or somebody else, if we don't provide them with the space to do their thing, to make mistakes, to learn from them, then we rob them of the opportunity to do that, to experience that, to get the lesson out of it. And if that happens, then we're potentially stunting their growth as a result, and potentially stunting their ability to be able to truly uncover the direction they want to go in.
It's kind of like fanning a flame in some regards. If you fan the flame, you blow it, the flame grows. But if you put a wet blanket over it and you give it no oxygen, the flame goes out. And I think a lot of times we as human beings, we as managers of people, we as CEOs of companies, we as head of HRs, we as parents, we want to control the narrative. We want things to work out the way that we envision in our mind. And that makes sense. We build plans, we strategize, we think about things. But all I really feel like I can control is, am I prepared and did I give it my best effort? Whatever it is in my life. Am I prepared and did I give it my best effort? Whether you go and do a keynote like I know you do and the lighting guy screws the lighting up or the sound's off, or all of a sudden 10 people get up and leave because they got to go to the bathroom in the middle of the most important part of Cameron's piano ensemble, and they get up and leave. It just, like, you just let them. Just control what you can control, plan and prepare the best that you can, and then just let it be whatever it's going to be. It doesn't mean you don't care. It's a tricky thing because I'm highly competitive. I want to win. I hate to lose more than I like to win, but I've immersed myself into preparing, giving my best effort, make sure my mind's in the right space no matter what I am doing personally or professionally. And if it doesn't work out, then reflecting on why. What could I have done differently to be more prepared the next time around?
How does that show up specifically in the workplace then? You're driven, you're ambitious, you have specific things that you're aiming to achieve. You're also aiming to enable people to bring their own best version of themselves and to achieve great things themselves. How do you go about then ensuring that the company objectives are achieved while also giving autonomy to folks and relinquishing some of that control that you might have? Because this, I think, is a big challenge that a lot of leaders have, is releasing that control, delegating effectively, and enabling there to still be an outstanding outcome to occur. So how does that show up in the workplace?
The long answer to that, the long range response to that strategy is you got to hire the right people. You got to hire people that want autonomy, that understand your vision, that align with it. Doesn't mean they agree with it. They align with it, and they have the characteristics to run their business, their department, their role in a way that aligns with you as a CEO. Now, the challenge is for many of your listeners, they're like, that sounds great, but I've got all these people that work in my company and they all don't align perfectly well. And what I would recommend that you do is you attack that issue like I mentioned previously. Let's get after why. Why are they struggling to get things done on time? Why are they struggling to meet deadlines? Is their work quality not great? Why are they showing up late? Why do they not seem engaged? Whatever the issue is that you have or that you perceive of an employee, and also recognizing how mature are they to have that kind of conversation, because sometimes when you provide that level of feedback, it's a two-way street. And at times, if you can't get to the bottom of what's going on with them in their life, you mentioned something about all the scars and the journey. Every person, when they show up today to work, there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, however old they are, of days of experiences of things that made them the human being they are that day at work. And if we're not recognizing those things and we're not getting to know them and they're just a transaction, they're a number on a spreadsheet, then my sense is it's going to be an uphill battle. And if you have a set of core values you can lean into and be your pillar for how people act and work, if you have a strategy and a vision that's clearly articulated, if you made their goals abundantly clear, you have those tranches, you have those specific items, those markers that suggest this is how we do things. And because that's what our baseline is, I notice that you're not doing this, or I see that you're really doing this well. And having those specific measurements makes management and alignment around goal attainment easier. But it all starts with the quality of person you have and how well you build relationships and manage their work in an effective way.
It's kind of like in a romantic relationship, right? It's often said like two of the major pieces is choose well to begin with. Like choose well, like choose wisely, because everything else after that, if you don't, is a massive uphill battle. And the second component is choose somebody that is willing to continue working at it. Right, and continue growing and continue evolving. And these two components, I think it could be said for any area of life, is to choose well and then to continue to be relentless in how we pursue that, how we execute on that. I think it's interesting as well, you mentioned about the different measurements in place, because this goes for even in our lives as well. If we can have a set of core values, the more that we can turn them into objective measures as to whether we're on track or off track, then the more that we can understand how we can actually do something different to get a different outcome. What are some of the ways that you've seen within the workplace then when it comes to culture, when it comes to values, of continuing to reinforce the guardrails, if you will, right? Reinforce what direction we're going in and how do we go about that?
We do two things inside of our firm around core values that I think are game changers. They're simple in their explanation. They're, in my opinion, a little bit difficult to implement, especially if you haven't had that type of rigor around it. Number one, we have 5 core values, and we have a measurement system that's 1 through 4, but 1 is the highest rated, means you're leading when it comes to core value, greatness through accountability. Let's just use that one as an example. 1 is leading, 2 is living, 3 is learning, and 4 is lagging. So I've been doing this for 10 years. I almost forget what each one of the L's are. But 1, 2, 3, 4, we thought about doing a numbering system. Then we got some recommendations of softening the language a bit so you can we really want it to be a dialogue between a manager and a direct report. What we do on a quarterly basis is that we ask each of the employees to measure how they're doing on that 1 to 4 scale, that leading to lagging indicator. And then their manager will do the same thing. And then they'll talk about the areas that they're aligned to and that they're different. We don't really want someone thinking they're a 1 and their manager thinking they're a 4. That's bad. And I've had 1 or 2 of those conversations and they're awkward. And we have to give real specific examples as to where there's a disconnect. We create that measurement system. We softened it with the words. We do it on a consistent basis. That way we're not having a lot of cultural challenges. And when we do, they're very clear that you're not aligning to greatness through accountability or passionate desire to improve or living by the platinum rule, whatever the actual core value might be. The second thing that we do, which I think is very unique, because I have a lot of employees who've worked for large companies that say, I've never received this type of recognition or accountability to core values in my career. Every single week, we have a survey system that employees can go into and nominate an employee that did something that lived by those core values. And on our weekly huddle that we have firm-wide, there's a section on our dashboard that goes through all the nominations, who nominated them, what they said about them, and the person that was recognized. And it puts smiles on people's faces. I think it puts smiles more on the people that are able to recognize the other person for living by their core value than even the person that did it. And I think those 2 things that we did, the measurement, the definition of doing it well or poorly, the consistency of communication between manager and direct report, and then giving every employee a chance to be recognized for achieving and living by those core values, have allowed us to minimize the number of transactions or actions inside of our business that don't align to what is most important to us.
So good. I think it's really important within organizations to continue to reinforce that, because just having words, at the end of the day, they're just words when it comes to our values, when it comes to the mission. And if they're on the wall and people are paying lip service to them, then it's not going to cut it. One follow-up question I've got with the weekly one, because that has to be done in a way that's fairly simple for people to execute, right? How do you have it set up? Do you have it as a form on a private page, for example? Is it something in-house? Is it done within your communication platform? How do you go about that specifically?
Shout out to Smart Sheets, which is basically a glorified Excel spreadsheet online. And there's a form that one of our HR leaders created that simply asks you your name, who you're recognizing, which of the 5 core values you're recognizing them for, gives you a little free form to write a little note. And then you click save, and it automatically finds its way to my head of HR and on that report as well. They're all super integrated with one another, and everybody has the link. It's link available to them. It's in our Teams chat. It's on our employee portal, and it's very easy to remember. I also, at the beginning of every call, I also suggest, hey, if you forgot to enter in your Willory way, which is what we call living by the core values, you can go ahead and shout them out at the end. And oftentimes people will say, oh, I totally forgot to recognize Brian for doing a great job with this particular client. He did A, B, and C, and then they'll type in the recognition. The one other thing we'll do every quarter, and we just did this not too long ago, is the person that gets the most votes wins the Willory Way recognition for the quarter and gets a gift certificate and additional recognition for them. I've had grown men and women cry as a result of achieving that goal, which is very moving and touching and means a lot to them.
Really cool, man. Really cool. For those listening that are on the other side of this, so they're maybe looking for a role, they're determining where to go to have that alignment where their own values meet with the other values of the company, and they're able to bring the best version of themselves. Because if you think back to your son and the example that you gave of how do we get people who are listening to be their own version of the lawn mowing business versus the soccer that, was being played before. How does someone think about that, and what questions should they be asking as they go through that process?
Well, those that are in a candidate looking for a job, or even employers that are trying to find the right kind of fit, you talk about the idea you hire for skill, you fire for fit. That's why I've seen organizations get way smarter on being specific about the culture and what the values are. My primary recommendation to employers is to have a process of how you recognize and define and measure your core values. It just, to your point, Cameron, they just cannot be words on a billboard. There has to be some form of measurement. They have to take life. We define each one of them, and then we define each one of those, measuring the leading, the lagging. I think that's a critical aspect. I think as a candidate, if you're looking for a job now or you're in a role, I think you have to ask those questions about, well, what are our core values? Is that clear? Let's start there. Some companies don't even have them documented. So let's start with getting defined. And then how are we living by them? Because ultimately what I feel like those core values are the rules that your parents set when you're not home. Remember when you were a kid and your mom and dad left and said, okay, Cameron, it's your job to take care of little Timmy. You got to act like mom and dad are here. So you can't set the house on fire. You can't play with matches. You can't pile drive each other like you're watching a wrestling match. Just keep things civil. And the core values, to me, allow people to know how they're going to act when they're part of our organization. When they do it, we recognize them. When they stray outside of it, we talk about it. When they veer way off course, oftentimes it's discussed with them, or they may not be asked to come back to the firm. And I think they create that level of gravity, in my opinion, on how we're supposed to treat each other. That's the starting point. Then when it comes to skills and how do you do the job, the correlation I have all the time, Cameron, of winning and losing and success in business and the importance of having great talent is I was a season ticket holder for the Cleveland Cavaliers prior to LeBron James coming back from Miami. And then I was a season ticket holder for 3 or 4 years while he was a Cleveland Cavalier, and we won an NBA championship, and I maintained my membership and or season tickets a year or two after he left. And we stink without LeBron James was evident. And then when we got talent, we won more games and we were better. And I have this thought process of encouraging my clients to look at their roster of their employees like NFL teams do and NBA teams do. They are relentless on making sure they have top talent, because they win at all cost. And we at times get settled into comfortability or don't want to discuss things or don't think we can upgrade talent, which I completely understand. But I feel like because of that competitiveness, you elevate the level of basketball or football that's played in the NFL or NBA because of that competition. And I think we as employers, I have this exercise I recommend to my clients is, would you emphatically rehire every one of your direct reports? And that emphatically rehiring is based upon, do they align to your core values? Do they live by them? Do they do their job well? And are they a great fit for your business? We can measure all those things specifically. And then when you answer the question, yes, why? And when you answer the question, maybe, why? And when you answer the question, no, why? And then we build opportunities for those that we say an emphatic yes. Let's give them more chances to grow inside of our firm. The maybes we have, that's probably the toughest one to talk about. And then the no's are, how are we going to coach them up and become a better fit, aligned to our core values, make sure we're clear, or how are we going to coach them out? And ultimately, by doing so, you start to have those real conversations to say, is my roster deep enough and rich enough for us to win as an organization? And I have this simple thought in my head. If you have any issue in your business, look at the person that's responsible for that function. And my guess is they have a huge part of that issue. If you, on the opposite end, have a very successful department, look at the lead person that's running that department. All issues come back to a person 99 out of 100 times.
One of the things that's interesting about you mentioning about the NBA, NFL as well, NBA specifically, where you're sharing there, is the standards that professional sports teams adhere to. And having great talent raises those standards and continues to raise those standards. Having great leaders raises those standards. It raises people up to perform at a higher level. And when you put those standards in place within the firm, within a company, it's the opportunity for those who are the maybes, those who are the no's that you mentioned, to step up. And if they do, there's a great place for them here. And if it's not a fit, if it's out, then it's a step out component, right? And so what are some of the things that can be done? And let's actually widen this out a little bit both within company standard, but also within our own lives. How can we go about raising our own standards when we've experienced different challenges in the past?
I'll answer that in a question because you got me thinking about this sports thing. And it's got me thinking about the NFL compared to college football. College football coach and program, professional football coach and their system and culture. It's more difficult for NFL teams to turn over their roster because of the salary cap, because of the union contracts, everything else they have. So as a result, you can have a great culture. I'm thinking of the New England Patriots, who have had a winning culture for nearly 2 decades. And a lot of that can be pointed back to Tom Brady and Bill Belichick as an example. Those two people leave, and then all of a sudden they have a dip because their talent shortens out. Then all of a sudden they get a new coach and things start to get better. They get a better quarterback. There's an aspect of that you can't turn that talent over as fast. But in major college football these days, you can reset your roster in an afternoon because of NIL, and basically everybody on your team is a free agent. They don't necessarily have, it's a yearly contract. And so it gets me to thinking, because there's a lot of interest by employers to have high-performing teams. Many of us are infatuated, maybe too much, with sports. And I just look at roster and how they maintain rosters. And unfortunately, in Cleveland, I get to watch a really poorly run organization, no disrespect to the Haslam family, but the Cleveland Browns versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, which are very well run by Dan Gilbert and his family. And I think the standards that exist relate to the foundational aspects of our business. And if someone gets that and performs at a high level and appreciates it and wants that in their life, then I think they will stay as long as they want. But when someone doesn't meet those standards, not that way of life, the way that we do business or the way that we perform on the field, then all of a sudden they start to stand out, and the winners want to be around other winners. And the ones that are driving hard for success want to be around those that want to win and are going to do the same thing. And those that are short, those that are not pulling their weight, those that are maybe not capable because of whatever the reason is, it starts to stand out. And I think that's actually good, in my opinion. We only have so much time in this world. We might as well make the most of it while we're working. We might as well challenge ourselves very specifically. I think being content and being comfortable is a very dangerous thing in the workplace and in life, quite frankly. And I think having those standards, having others holding each other accountable, and you being willing to have difficult conversations with an employee that says, this doesn't seem to be working, can we talk about it? The one last thing I'll end with is this. Whenever that comes up inside of my firm, I always ask myself and my management team, what have we done to sell this employee short? What have we done as a firm, I as the owner, and our leadership team done to not set that employee up to be successful? We address those things, we specifically identify them, and then if we continue to see issues, then we at times may just think that it has to do with that employee and isn't the right fit.
What's great about that approach is there's multiple layers to that. There's responsibility that's in there, right? And it's owning as a company or as a leader, it's taking ownership and taking responsibility first and foremost internally, like within your own self, to go, okay, where have we fallen short? Because it's so easy to blame. It's so easy to remove responsibility, saying, oh, it's because of that. It's because of that person. It's because of this. It's because of this situation. It's because of the environment, the business environment, economic environment, for example. If we can take ownership of that first and foremost, there are so many lessons that are within there. And if you do it in that way as well, you're setting yourself up for filling any of the gaps that might be there, to then be able to hold that person fully accountable. And you've just set yourself up for, if it doesn't end up being a fit, if they don't end up stepping up and stepping into a greater version of themselves, then you've set things up really well for the next person to come into the company. And that relentless nature of that, I think that's when it comes to sports teams, when it comes to companies as well, that continual growth, that continual evolution, the continual commitment, no matter what happens, no matter what comes up, I think is a huge piece of the recipe, a huge component of the recipe to excellence, to generating that next level of excellence. So you mentioned about before how each person is coming into their role because they've got all of these other 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, 70 years of life experience that's led to them to be where they are. So everyone's had these different moments. Everyone's had their own story, right? What have been some of the big moments for you that have shaped who you've become?
How much time do you have, Cameron?
We got as much time as you want, my man. Let's go back though and let's go to maybe one or two big moments for you that really shifted the trajectory for you.
Try not to get emotional when I talk about these things, but I'll go back 5 years. I lost my mom and my dad in a very short period of time, in just over 1 year. Mom to breast cancer and dad to pancreatic cancer. In the midst of that, COVID hit us. A lot of change, a lot of things happening at once. I use this phrase, within 1 year, I lost my biggest fan and my hero. And I was and will always be the baby of my family. I have 3 older siblings, and I was anointed that name from very, very early on. Obviously, my siblings were a lot older than me. My brother Andy's 6 years, is closest in age. Teresa's 8, and my brother Tony's 10 years. But I hit the lottery when I was born into my family. There's no doubt about it. Doesn't mean my mom and dad didn't make mistakes, or I didn't get spanked, or they did things that I didn't really want. But I was a young person, didn't probably know any better, quite frankly. My parents were hardworking, dedicated, caring, loving people. Very different. My dad was an executive CEO accountant, kind of my way or the highway kind of leader. And my mom was a creative watercolor artist who was in touch with her emotions and feelings and spirit. Very unique combination that made me this creative entrepreneur. I don't know, that's what somebody once described when I told them that story. I don't take any credit for that, but it's pretty cool to see the two of them coming together and then having me and my siblings. When they passed away, I was forced, because my dad trusted me to take care of his trust, to work through with my siblings the diversification, distribution of my parents' assets and all that. And watching my dad, because he lived with me. When my mom passed, my dad was devastated because he thought for certain he would pass before she would. He was diagnosed when he was in his mid-50s with prostate cancer. He was the CEO of his hospital. I remember vividly coming home one night and saying, I had a really direct conversation with my urologist and said, you've got 10 to 15 years, Mike. Something else will get you in 10 or 15 years. That's how you're not going to die from his version of prostate cancer, but something else will get you. And my dad's, it went like that. Like his time frame changed. Let me retire as fast as I can. Let me get into retirement and enjoy retired life for as long as I possibly can. He changed his diet. My dad ended up living almost 20 years. So he outpaced that by 50 to 100%, however you want to look at it. That being said, when he retired, I don't think he had quite as much money in his nest egg as he wanted to. And he was always very judicious, always very mindful of how we spent our money in our family. That was his accounting background. That was also just innately him growing up with parents that lived through the Depression. and all that went that way. Anyway, recording this podcast just steps away from where my dad lived for 3 months. And because my mom had passed away, and just a few months later, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he didn't have anyone to care for him. And my siblings and I, along with my wife and my kids, thought it would be best that he live with us. And taking care of my dad changed my life forever. I'm not a caregiver. I realized that in the midst of it. I did the best that I could. He got palliative care, and they gave me very specific instructions on what to look for, because once he gets jaundice and these things start to happen with the way his eyes and his face looks, and he'll only have about a week to live. And that was always every morning a kiss on the forehead to my dad, just to say hello, but also to get a close-up of his eyes to see if that pancreatic cancer had started to rear its ugly head. But what I saw was a man transform, an 80-plus-year-old man who was stubborn and hard-nosed and steadfast on what he thought was right or wrong. That was the best and worst thing about my dad. If he liked you, he loved you. If he didn't like you, he really didn't like you. And if my nieces and nephews are listening to this, they know he had a favorite granddaughter, Carly Bernatovicz, my niece, because she was like my dad, and she moved down to Furman, which was just an hour away from where him and my mom lived. And she made an effort, and we joke about it with Carly, and she's the sweetest young woman you ever meet in your life. And that's just how my dad was. There was no in between. And that was the beauty of him, and that was also the curse. Anyway, he was so emotional about having lost my mom. I share this phrase oftentimes. He may not be proud of me if I say it, but he showed more love and admiration for my mom when she was passed than while she was alive. I think he had some regret, and he also just realized he could have been a better husband, a better man to her, and wanted to be with her. I remember vividly while he was living here, him pining away to be with my mom. And I finally had to say, Dad, you know what you're saying. He goes, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready. And that was a big transition. Also, to how he managed his money. Give away his car to at a very, very affordable price to his nephew. Didn't care. When it came to his assets, he's like, you know what? I need to write a check. I want to take care of the grandkids. He'd never gifted the grandkids that amount of money in his entire life. I want to do that now. And then the one that got me the most, Cameron, was when we sold my mom and dad's condo. And he had this real estate agent that he wanted me to use in Asheville, North Carolina. And then I had a conversation with my dad, and I said, well, what do you want to sell the house for? And he looks at me and says, John, I've never owned a house in my life. I'm like, what do you mean? Very first house I bought with you and the kids, as soon as we had the mortgage pay off, we used that house to buy another house. And then that house turned into another house. And then we moved and retired, and that house turned into another house. And now that I own this condo, I've been free and clear to pay for it. The proceeds of that are going to you and your siblings. You set the price. It's your money, not mine. And this was a man that had spent his whole life managing every penny and nickel and dime that he possibly had. And I realized that things, money, houses, cars, were not that important. And the experiences and the relationships and how you felt as a human being was. And taking care of my dad and watching him pass away gave me that incredible life lesson. And I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, I never thought in the midst of helping my dad take a shower as a grown man, that ain't fun for either one of us. Or helping him get up and down off of the toilet because he wasn't strong enough to do that. That's a humiliating thing for a father to ask your son to do. And I did the best that I possibly could. And it was the hardest, most rewarding 3 months of my life. But for whatever reason, God wanted me to see that firsthand. And I reset my life, quite honestly, around going through the grieving of losing both of my parents and realizing what was most important to me. And it was not things. It wasn't cars. It wasn't houses. It wasn't boats. It wasn't jet skis. It wasn't golf memberships. It wasn't anything. It was just the relationships you had with people, the experiences that you had in your life, and how you felt about yourself. And that was a life changer for me, and one that will galvanize John Bernatovicz, the human being, till the day that I pass. And I hope I can influence just one person to learn that lesson, the hard lesson I had to, sooner than later.
How has that shaped? So that's 5 years ago, and thanks for sharing. That's I can only imagine how challenging that was to go through, and as you mentioned as well, rewarding at the same time. How has that shown up then, when it comes to the decisions you've made, when it comes to maybe how you spend your time and what you choose to prioritize?
Is probably too much an appropriate response. I've had pretty much everyone that knew me before then and after that knew me well enough had said that you're different. And I changed. As a grown man, I was 46 years old. I joke about the fact that I went through a midlife crisis, but not a typical one for a middle-aged man. No Corvettes with rag tops and all that. I didn't jet black my hair. I didn't fly away for a long weekend or something and do something stupid. I ended up writing a book, which was the most unique professional accomplishment besides starting my firms that I've achieved. And I frankly, in the spirit of my grief counseling, I recognized some wounds I had from the relationships I had with my parents, and I forgave them for that. I got way more in touch with my emotions and feelings as a grown man, which for us middle-aged grown men, that has become more socially acceptable. But when I grew up as a young person, it was not. And I didn't grow up in a family where it was. We didn't talk about feelings or emotions ever. And that was an evolution. What I did was I leaned into who I was as a human being, and is that what I wanted people to remember me as, and where I thought I was falling short, I ran toward that. Really worked on my self-awareness and emotional intelligence big time. And then I thought about, how can I carry on the legacy of my parents? And I came up with this very simple 3-word phrase: make an impact. And I just decided that everything I was going to do in my life, and I was going to spend a concerted amount of time on, was to make an impact. One of the changes that I made, very real, was I played golf my entire life from the time I was 7 until today. And I played a lot of golf with my dad. That was our biggest relationship building. I probably spent 10,000 plus hours on a golf course with my father, which, what a blessing. But I decided shortly after my parents passing away that I had to give back through golf. So I volunteer coach at our local high school. And any kid that wants any counsel or advice to learn from someone that played Division I golf and once beat Tiger Woods in my life, that's a true story. You can look it up on the internet. That maybe someone younger than me, someone with less experience, could learn from the errors of my ways or the lessons that I learned over 40 plus years playing that great game. And I just started doing things that I thought could make an impact, Cameron. And I was the guard and measure of that. And I also had to look at, how did it make me feel in the spirit of it? I also lost some friendships in that.
Why was that?
They just didn't align culturally. They didn't, let's say culturally, didn't align to my core values, my evolved core values. And I think the thing that changed me the most, I don't know if I've ever said this publicly before, is that I didn't realize how much my parents loved me until they were gone. And then that void of love that they have, you then start checking yourself and other relationships in your life. And you're like, wait a second, this one is very one-sided. That classic debit, credit, whatever you want to call it with relationships. You got to make a deposit to take a withdrawal. I was making a lot of deposits in some relationships, and the other person was making a lot of withdrawals. And I addressed it with one friend that went terribly bad. My therapist then suggested the next time it came up, John, just let it die out. And it did. And I'm better off for it. I didn't need that in my life. I didn't realize it at the time because my parents were filling me up with love and admiration, and other friends were. And the ones that weren't, I was placating to that. I was allowing it to be the way it was, even though it wasn't right for me. And I reached a point where I just didn't tolerate it anymore, Cameron. It wasn't aligning with who I was at that time. And I don't regret it for a second. I don't regret it for a second.
You mentioned about deposits. Has there been any examples that you could share about models of people making deposits, whether it's within family, whether it's within work, wherever it is? Like, has there been some experiences or examples that you've seen of people really making deposits that have, just really shaped how you've gone about building relationships now?
I'll give a major plug. I'll make sure he listens to this, and my brother Andy. There's no human being on this earth that is more like me than him. The way we look, the way we laugh, the way we see things. Our spouses get spooked out when we're both in the same room together, just as a heads up. Sorry, Emily and Bethany, for that. I'll never forget when I called my brother to tell him, actually, he called me to tell me that our mom had passed. And we had a moment, and then he said something. He says, well, I guess it's time that I grow up. I'm like, holy cow. We had empathy for what all that felt like. And we were wired DNA-wise very similarly, look the same, talk the same, think the same. And what I will give my brother Andy credit for is he showed me, he lives for relationships and experiences. He does. He did it his whole life. It just became way more evident as that became clear to me as I grew up and went through that hardship of losing my parents. And he's been intentional about reaching out and creating connections, and did it with me, A, because we were siblings, and B, because we were best friends. It was easy. It was easy to talk to. Very rarely, if ever, have gotten in a fight. Although I remember one time when I was a kid, he had me pinned back, hands behind my head. Literally, I had no chance. He was right on top of me, and the only thing I could think of, Cameron, was to spit in his face. And that was a bad decision. I think that's the last time we got in a fight. I lost, but I won at the same time. Anyway, he just was great about reaching out, checking in for no reason, no agenda. How are you? And he meant it when he said it. I think a lot of times we don't mean that when we say it, and we especially don't mean it when we answer, how are you doing? And I marveled at that. At the same time, I had a group of friends that if I didn't make the concerted effort to get the group of friends together, we didn't get together. And at a period of time, right around that point, I got frustrated. Like, why do I always have to be the one that gets the group together? And then I modeled and listened very closely to how my brother was developing those relationships. And he said he didn't care. As long as we can get together. What does it matter if it's me, the one that sends out the message? And so I just leaned into that. And then I've had those 15 friends that are in my close circle, not all of them, but the vast majority of them say, I really appreciate that you make a concerted effort to keep us together. I will show up to as many of these events as I can, because I know most men are bad at it. And to be honest with you, I don't have any other friends that are making this kind of investment to keep us together. And I thought, well, there we go. And so I just put my ego aside and I said, you know what? If I want to get together and these people mean enough to me, and if it bothers me enough to the point, well, then say something. And then, as dudes will do, well, that's your job, Johnny. Like that, you're supposed to do that. If anyone else did it, we wouldn't get together. And I'm like, oh, dang it. Okay, so be it. But the relationship building, the intentionality around it, and the responsibility you have to pour your heart into where you want to, were all incredible things I learned from my brother. And I can't wait to talk to him again. And he called me yesterday to check in, 6:00. I haven't had a chance to call him back, but I will.
Have there been other moments in your life that have shaped, I guess, who you've become? You mentioned that, because obviously there's a really big shift when your parents passed, and almost a 180, if you will. And have there been those other moments? Because you'd already started your business by then, right? You'd already achieved some really great things. Like what led to the business starting in the first place? Was there a shift that happened back then? And just maybe any of the other big moments that have happened.
Well, it's an unfortunate theme here, but when my father-in-law, Dale, my wife's dad, passed away from leukemia at 53, that was another significant event. I was in my early 30s at the time, and he was a significant part of my life, my wife's life, her family, and he left us way too early, and it left a significant impact on my wife's family for sure. We still laugh and cry about Dale being gone, and I give my wife and her family tons of credit. I feel like my kids know who Grandpa Dale was, never having met him, because they talk about him and show pictures of him and the impact that he had. But when he passed, I remember talking to him countless times about my career and roles, and he was always super curious and interested in things. And I just remember thinking to myself, I got to get after what I want to do in my career. And by him passing, it inspired me to become an entrepreneur full time. It also inspired me to start my business from home, working virtually in 2010. Yes, I said 2010, not 2020. I'll never forget one time I had someone tell me in 2020 in the midst of COVID, you knew COVID was coming when you founded your firm. You knew this was going to happen. And I said to them exactly, I said, if I knew them, I wouldn't be talking to you right now, because I'd be way more well off and probably be flying in an airplane somewhere in some other great destination. But having gone through that loss and also experiencing my wife's family is very different than mine, especially back then. We didn't talk about emotions. We didn't talk about feelings. We talked about the day and sporting events and whatever the case was, my dad's day at work. But when I started going to dinner at my wife's house, they would talk about, dare I say, pimples and zits and periods and boyfriends and feelings and emotions. And I walked in there, I was like, oh my God, what are you doing? And then over time, I became aware of my own emotions and feelings, thanks to seeing my father-in-law exemplify those behaviors and how he fostered that type of communication in his family. That changed me for sure. I started my own business full time. And then I actually started going to therapy right well before my father-in-law passed away, but also seeing him and their family being in touch and in tune with their feelings and emotions that I wasn't, and I needed to get someone to help me to recognize that. That was another watershed, significant fork in the road, real situation. I feel bad that and I say this as a part of my keynote because I share the story of my parents passing away and writing a book and it taking me on another path. I say this out loud and I try to live it. Don't wait for a tragedy in your life to strike for you to get after your life. Don't wait for your parents to pass away or your father-in-law to get leukemia and pass 6 months later for you to start your business or get married or have a family or simplify your life or whatever it is on your bucket list of items. Get after it. I don't know what it is that you want to do, but you know. And something's getting in your way, life, work, family, marriage, kids. I'm not suggesting that you throw those things away, but that you prioritize yourself and your goals and your aspirations. Because I now, as a 52-year-old man, am way happier in my own skin than I ever was. And it's having gone through those hardships and realizing that I'm going to be a better person on the other end and doing the work that needs to be done to get in touch with who I really am and what makes me tick.
Mm. You mentioned that you became inspired to start the business. What specifically happened in that moment that had you go, you know what, I've got to get after it? Was it because he had passed and you realized life is short, or was it something else in there specifically?
That was a part of it, that life is short and got to get after it and you never know. At the same time, he was an ER doctor and that job had a lot of stress to him. He loved that job. His story is fascinating. Reason why he got into medicine when he was 6 years old. Sorry for the family heirlooms of not having the exact age, but he was on a boat, Bob's Lake in Canada, with his mom and dad. His mom fell out of the boat. She couldn't swim. His dad jumped in after his wife, Dale's mom, and they both drowned in Bob's Lake. While Dale, as a 6-year-old, his dad was yelling at him to get the life preserver off and untie it, and he wasn't strong enough as a little kid to do it. And I remember vividly Dale telling me a very heartfelt story. He told me it only one time. He said, I became a doctor because I never wanted to be in a situation I couldn't solve. I never wanted to be somewhere where I couldn't help someone in need. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was in sales and I enjoyed my career, but it wasn't I was successful at it, but it wasn't like super gratifying. And I'd always aspired to own my own business. My brother Andy, my idol that I mentioned earlier, has had and had his own business at that time. And I thought I was capable of doing it, but I had a lot of reasons to not do it. I was making decent money, seemed like a risk. Why upset the apple cart? And then after my father-in-law passed just a few years later, I thought to myself, you got to find something to do. And I started a side hustle while I was working in corporate America, and that entrepreneurial bug bit me. And the rest professionally is history up until what else I can accomplish from today forward. But definitely seeing my father-in-law, who got after his professional dreams, and at the same time had stress in his life and his work, and trying to find something that I could do in my life that would create an income level for my family to provide at the same time that didn't feel like work, didn't feel like I had to clock in and out of an office. And I felt empowered and had autonomy. And that's where entrepreneurism and being my own boss created that platform for me.
How does someone build the drive or build the inspiration when there isn't a big moment that occurs, right? If you're sharing to don't wait for a tragedy to get after it. How do we go about thinking about that? Because there's so many people that are going to be listening to this that go, I wish I could be doing this, or I thought about this, or I've dreamed of this and haven't gone after it. What do they need to be thinking about? Is it something they need to be telling themselves? Is it just going and taking an action? Is it something else? Like, what specifically would you recommend someone do that means they don't have to wait for something big to happen in order for them to get started?
If you're listening and you're in that mode, exactly what Cameron described, here's my take and suggestion. Look at the major milestones in your life. Let's just say it was a birthday. Let's just say it was Thanksgiving. Let's just say it was Christmas. How long ago was a year ago? How long ago did it feel? Did it feel like a week? Did it feel like a month? Did it feel like 3 months? Because ultimately, that's what it is. We don't have that much time. And in the spirit of getting after our life, using those milestones to replace the tragedies that I mentioned before as inspiration is one of the things that I do. I can't believe how quickly Thanksgiving comes every year that Thanksgiving comes. Because it's like, didn't we just do this? And we have a tradition in my wife's family, and it's pretty much the same thing. And you feel like 1 year, it's like deja vu. Oh my God, I literally was here, same plate in front of me, same group of people, but it was 3 years ago. And time just goes by fast, and it goes by faster the older we get. I know time is constant, but it really isn't, because time when I was in 7th grade watching the clock to strike 2:37 p.m. so I could get out of there is different than when I work in my business and it's 2:37 before I could even realize that it's the afternoon. I haven't eaten lunch yet, go down the line. We all can empathize with that. I think it's taking those markers in your life, those milestones, and realizing that we don't have that much time and we only get one shot at this thing called life. And I heard someone say this once, Cameron, and it just stuck with me. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. The way you mow your grass, the way you shovel snow off of your front porch if you are so unfortunate to get snow, unlike Cameron in Austin, Texas. The way that you play golf or you work inside of your business or you treat other people, whether it's your spouse or your friend or a perfect stranger. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And my guess is if you're sitting there waiting and haven't taken the risk, well, maybe you're not a risk taker. And that's okay. If that is the case, or you realize those things that are preventing you from getting those things done, my encouragement to you is to find someone in your life that knows you well enough for you to share your story, your concerns, your barriers to achieving the things you want to, and ask them for help and ask them to hold you accountable. If I were ever to have something in my life that I thought I wanted to do and I was too afraid to do it, one of the first calls I would make would be to my brother and say, hey, I got this thing wrapping around in my head. I'm really afraid to do it because of A, B, and C. He would talk through it, and if he thought it was a good idea, he'd go do it, John. And how can I hold you accountable to do that? I think having those milestones, realizing that life is really short, And then also, if you have an idea of something you haven't found yourself doing, find someone in your life, a mentor, a brother, a sibling, a friend, a complete stranger like me. Like, I don't care. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, find me. I'm happy to talk through whatever your goals and aspirations are. And I'm living firsthand to get after it, because if not, you're going to be 75 years old and retired. And I never wanted to live my life in regret. I never regret anything I do. And I say that in a way that makes me sound arrogant as I heard those words come out of my mouth. But I should rephrase that. I don't want to live my life in regret. It's probably the better way for me to reframe that, because I only get one shot at this. And so I might as well make the most of it.
Yeah, I think that regret's an interesting one, right? There was this song I wrote a few years ago, and it has in the lyrics these questions in the chorus: what will I become? Is it all I really love? What will I be giving up? And is that worthwhile? And if we can say enough times, hand on our heart, that yep, that was worthwhile, that over time becomes a deeply fulfilling existence, right? You answer enough times no, and doesn't matter what you say about no regrets. There's at some stage, there's going to come a time where there's going to be an element of regret there. And, we often overestimate what we can do in a year, underestimate what we can achieve in 5 or 10 years. And like you said, a year can go past. It can feel like it goes really, really quickly. And so I think when it comes to getting after it, is you don't have to have all the answers figured out either. Because the moment you have to have it all figured out is the moment you're just going to stop yourself from even getting started in the first place, because it's just not going to happen. And we've both had these experiences, right, where the clarity comes from the doing. The clarity comes after you execute on certain pieces. And I'm sure you never anticipated writing a book, for example, but then it's within the realms of the work that you're doing, and it has helped a lot of people. And so it's just fascinating to think about that. If you can just get started, if you've decided that there's something that you want to do, and being able to find what it is that's holding you back from actually executing on that, then just taking a small step without having to be a massive, massive leap forward. And I think it's a really important one that you mentioned, John, of finding someone who can hold you accountable. Holding yourself internally accountable, there's an internal responsibility that happens. That's very important as well, because you're the person you spend more time with than anybody else, right? And there is something outstanding about having an external layer of accountability there as well, from someone that you respect and someone that you trust. That increases the likelihood. There's plenty of studies out there that showcase this, that increase the likelihood that you're actually going to execute on it, and finding that person. So I think there's some great actionable items there that can really help folks. And so let's talk a little further around the relationships and the power of relationships. I remember you mentioning something around, was it someone's Rolodex or something like that? And yeah, just share about that. I remember you sharing it in a conversation we had previously.
Yeah. I go back to my dad. For those that don't know what it is, there's something called a Rolodex. It actually used to have cards, and you would put it in an A through Z order, and you'd have the phone number and address of people. And my dad was so intentional about the relationships. This is probably where my brother Andy got it from, maybe directly or indirectly. But my dad, literally, I can look over to the left and see him sitting at the kitchen table in the part of my house that I'm in right now. He would drive from Asheville, North Carolina with my mom. They would land here about 8.5 hours later. We'd give a hug and hello and everything else. And my mom would immediately go and hang out with my wife or catch up with me, or more importantly, spend time with my 2 kids, because she loved her grandkids. My dad would do that for a few seconds, and then he would come upstairs and we'd get his Rolodex, and he would call people. He would tell people that he made it. He'd tell his buddies that he golfed with at Asheville, North Carolina, "Hey, Joe, I made it up to Akron. John's doing well. Weather's this. We're going to be here for this long. See you on the other side." And he would then contact people locally to let them know that he was here. "Uncle Mike's here. Love to see you this day," this, that, and the other. And he was really, really intentional about it, to the point where he started doing these calls on Christmas Day on his Rolodex. And Cameron, I swear I've had at least 5 people that haven't seen me since my dad had passed. Tell me a story about how they met my dad and what he meant to them, whether it was golfing or as an executive or as a friend. And they say, one of the main things I miss about your dad is that call on Christmas Day.
Mm.
And I look at him, I say, I miss that too. My parents, they used to call us, each one of the siblings and grandkids, they would call us on our birthday and sing us happy birthday. I recorded it one time on my phone. I have it, and I'll send it out at times to my nieces and nephews on their birthday. And it meant the world to me. The funny part about that, Cameron, was that they would always call me the day before. My birthday is October 25th. They would call me on October 24th. And I just let them do it for a few years. And finally, one year, I went and looked at my birth certificate to see if I actually was born on October 25th or October 24th. I told my mom at one point, and she still kept calling me on October 24th, one day before. But they were always the first one to sing me happy birthday, and we're always just intentional about it. I think we get way too caught up in our own life, way too caught up in life, family, kids, work, etc., that we don't pinpoint those handful to 10 people that mean something to us, that we're intentional about reaching out to them. It is rare, and I give my brother credit. He is by far the best. It is rare that people are the ones to initiate the outreach and initiate it with no reason other than, how are you?
Did you ask your dad about why he did it? Or did he tell you? Or did you have that conversation or not?
No, I never did. The funny part was, it would piss my mom off because my mom was like, Mike, we're here with the grandkids. You don't see them ever. Joe back at the club, you're going to see him in 7 days. And he's a grown man. He's okay without knowing that you made it to Akron okay. It would irk her, but he was just that way. He felt compelled to maintain those relationships. And my guess is, being his son, if I had to speculate on why he did it, is that he just genuinely cared. Simple as that. He cared about that person. He didn't call 100 people, Cameron. The list wasn't that long. It was a short list of people that he left that he cared about, and it was a short people that were here in Akron or in our general area that he cared about and he wanted to see. I would say that would be his response without any hesitation. And I don't think he thought deeply enough about, I got to make this concerted effort. I also think he was pretty habitual. And when he got in the routine of it and felt the admiration from the other person on the other line, that I think that gave my dad fuel to continue doing it year over year.
Something powerful about consistently doing things over and over again that make them that's partially what makes them memorable. And then I'd say maybe with what you shared here as well, like the uniqueness of the experience as well that stood out to those friends, right? That, I don't know, I think about when I'm not here anymore, if there were people that shared examples of specific moments, not, oh, he was a really great guy, but I remember this one time, or I remember each year, and then there's something to follow that. To me, a demonstration of character, because it's how somebody continued to show up over and over and over again. And I reflect on what you shared earlier of how you do one thing is how you do everything. And in a world that is very transactional as it stands right now, if you can be the kind of person that is memorable, but not for the sake of being memorable, but for the sake of being a good human being, I think it's an incredible trait to continue to develop for the right reasons versus it being about some outcome you're aiming to achieve.
I couldn't agree with you more, Cameron. I think as I look back in my reflection of time and how I've evolved in my life, there was and I think this is true for human beings, at least my general observation, from the time you're 0 to mid-20s, 25-ish, and I'm using general terms of age, we are incredibly selfish. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my gosh, you've seen the kid get the toys stolen on the playground and having a full meltdown. But around the time that we get out of college and we get a job, and then maybe we get into a relationship, and then we buy a house, and all of a sudden things kind of turn off of John and they're on to my spouse or my house. And then if you're blessed to have children or have something in your life that means something to you that children can, then all of a sudden you become selfless. It's about staying up to make sure the kids are fed, or the business grows, or the house is fine. Like all of a sudden you kind of lose yourself in the midpoint of your life, in my opinion, because you poured so much of doing what you want to do early on, and then all of a sudden as we evolve and grow as human beings, we have to become selfless, and it's a conflict for a lot of people. And then what I've experienced myself, and what I'm encouraging younger people to do, is to look at what makes you tick and don't lose yourself in those mid years of your life. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get up with your kid, and you shouldn't do the things you should as a parent or as a business owner or as a great employee, but finding a way to make sure you're taking care of yourself in the midst of taking care of others. And that's been a significant pivot for me. And you said a phrase, you didn't say it exactly, but you reminded me of something. I recently had the treat to meet Malcolm Gladwell. It was in the Writers Series in Cleveland, Ohio, through our public library system, and he was promoting his new book. And I got a chance to meet him, and super cool guy. Here we go, MBA again. A huge MBA fan, and we talked about book publishing and what it was like to be on the road. Super cool guy, relatable. And then he got on stage and he got interviewed by a well-known, prominent university president. And there was one point in the conversation, Cameron, where he used a phrase that will stick with me for the rest of my life, and I'm so thankful to him for that. How aggressively distinctive, those two words, aggressively distinctive. He was talking about the University of Case Western Reserve at the time, because that was the president. How aggressively distinctive is Case Western Reserve trying to be? And then how are you as the president of that university trying to be aggressively distinctive? And then he related it back to each one of us. And as one of the greatest storytellers of our time, was talking about how can you stand out from everyone else, because people like Malcolm Gladwell remember that, and then they get to, why are you that way? Like, he told this really great story about the 10,000 hour rule that's in Outliers, if you've ever read the book, about how mastery comes by doing something 10,000 hours. He said that's not necessarily true, because that was meant to be a metaphor. It's kind of funny how he described it. And he said the real story was about who helped you along the way to be successful or mastering something. There's got to be someone there. He gave this example of a 13-year-old chess player who was a savant, whose mom drove him to the chess yard. He wouldn't have been a chess savant and the best player in New York City if it wasn't for his mom. Be aggressively distinctive, whatever that means.
Isn't it beautiful? The way to achieve extraordinary things comes through the experience that you're having with other people. Very rarely are you going to find how somebody became incredibly successful without somebody else there in some way, shape, or form, right? Or people there. That's what is incredible about being human, is the ups and the downs, everything in between, the challenging moments. But the people we get to do it with, that's what really matters at the end of the day. And being able to have those experiences with different people. You know, it's interesting. I just had this thought. There was this moment that I had. It was in 2017. I'd been single for a number of years at the time. And I was in the northern part of Argentina in the rainforest there for a project. I'd sold everything that I owned, and I was on this journey around the world. And at that time, being single was a good thing. I didn't want to be in a relationship. I didn't want anything, because after things that had happened in my previous relationship, and when it ended, and the heartbreak that I experienced, and it took me a while to work through that and overcome that. And then there was this moment where this massive storm ripped through in the evening, and I was in this cabin on my own in the rainforest. All other cabins were separate. And I've never experienced before of the storm coming through, then another storm leaving and another one coming through. It was almost like a set of waves coming through. And I'm just laying there, and it was just a simple thought of, this would be nice to share with someone, you know, because I had that experience now, but there wasn't and isn't anyone that I'm able to share and reminisce on that moment and that experience. And so I think it not only goes for achieving extraordinary things, but just experiencing beautiful moments together. It makes life meaningful. And I think it's going to be really important for us in the years to come to be very intentional, like your father was. Be very intentional about how we're continuing to nurture the relationships that we have that matter. Because in an increasingly digital world, in an increasingly fragmented world, that's going to become even more challenging to prioritize. And it seems to be that way and what's happening. And so it's just a small observation that I had just now that, yeah, being intentional about the time that we spend and dedicating that time to others.
And I think social media has created this perception of how we are as human beings in very small, bite-sized, great moments. Take a selfie when I'm in front of this, or I'm out with my family,
reel,
or
right? Yeah.
having this experience right now, which is, all the snapshots on social media probably last an hour of time in people's lives. That's not how they really are. And that's our perception as human beings. And I have another quote that just sticks in my head. It's PJ Fleck. At the time, he was the coach of a MAC school in football. He's the row the boat guy. And he would say, never compare yourself against anyone else other than the person you were the day before.
So good.
And the criticality of us trying to think, as you said, I feel like as a result, because Cameron has a nice car or lives in a nice house, that Cameron's happier than me, and Cameron has the life that I want to have. Instead of maybe that person you emulate or think about is not as happy as you think they are. And what I have found, what makes people the most happy, as I think to myself, is the experiences you had and the relationships you have. Those are the things my dad talked about, and the things that he had, the tangible things, a car, a house, even the shirt on his back. He's like, just get rid of all the clothes, donate it. Like all those things he had accumulated that we at times show pictures of us in a new car, in a new house. We think that that's what success means. And it's not. There's no other way for me to say it. It's important to have a house. It's important to have a roof over your head. Don't get me wrong. But you won't be talking about that the last month of your life. Trust me.
I think if we can have the materialistic things, if you will, as a way of expanding on who we are, like a house, for example. It can be something to show off, a huge home, for example. And it can also be a place where memories are created, right? You mentioned about the social media side of things and putting things on and seeing people's highlights reel, right? I remember seeing something a number of years ago. It was a photographer. She got her mum to drop her at the airport, and she was flying to Bali for a holiday, for a vacation. And for the next, I think it was the next few weeks, it's at least, I think 1 or 2 weeks, she photographed, herself in these beautiful locations of, inspiring place that she was in, staying in, and revealed that she'd been in her apartment in her home the whole time. She hadn't gone to Bali. She'd gotten a ride back afterwards. Didn't tell her mom, didn't tell anybody. And it was to demonstrate that just because you see something online doesn't mean that it's real. And I had a thought just now with what you shared earlier about the way that you do one thing is the way that you do everything. I wonder, with posting things onto social for the purpose of likes or the purpose of external validation to know that I'm enough, for example, if we're doing it for that reason, again, I'm massively a proponent for social media. There's been change and impact that I've been able to make personally because of these different platforms. And it can end up being used the wrong way. I wonder if we're doing it to try and be somebody, and yet behind closed doors, we're not that, whether that's one piece, not the only piece, but one piece of a major problem that we're experiencing because mental health and other challenges are increasing, right? Depression, anxiety, suicide, these things are getting worse. They're not getting better. That if there's a massive disconnect, then all of a sudden it's somebody that I wish I was, but every single time I post something that's aiming to get the validation that finally I'm enough, deep down, unconsciously, I'm proving why I'm not, because I believe I'm this, but I'm showing that I'm that. And there's the gap. And I've never thought about it in that way, but I wonder if that's maybe one of the challenges that we're coming up against.
I believe so, for sure. There are times when I'll post things, maybe you feel the same way, where you're having a bad day, or I schedule a fair amount of my posts. So I'll have a post that'll pop out and I'll get a bunch of likes. And the moment that I'm in at that time is I don't really feel quite like that guy while the post hit the airwaves or social media. I do believe in my heart of hearts that there's a level of genuineness that can come across in your social medias, of not always taking pictures of yourself with that great smile. I've had a lot of women tell me that their most well-received posts are ones where they haven't put their hair and makeup together, right? Or for us guys, to where we maybe just rolled out of bed or haven't done what we're supposed to do. And I think being genuine in that regard, to the best of your ability, to not overshare, because I think sometimes that can get you in trouble. But I can't agree with you more, Cameron. I can tell from my own personal experience at times when posts go somewhere and when I'm not quite feeling like the person I represented online, it's something to chew on. Dig into that quite a bit, and making sure that am I okay as a human being? Do I love you, John? Do I care about you? Have we navigated through the challenges that you have? Because that gap is real that you're mentioning, and creating a persona that isn't real can be a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, slippery slope, right? I think about with AI and whatever technologies come next as well, just how important a level of authenticity is going to become. And I think the in-person component of that, real conversations like this, are going to become really valuable, really important. It's the same as in-person experiences, in-person events, because these are going to be some of the last things that we know to be real. You know, with just how realistic image and video generation is already now, let alone in another 2, 3, 5 years time, where, you know, there's already some things where I go, I kind of think I know, but there was one that I saw the other day, which was actually comparing what's real and what's not with some of the latest generation technology. And it was one I didn't get right. And so think about that in a few years' time, or 5 years' time. And again, I think that's where if we can continue to nurture the relationships, because there was a study that I saw, and I don't get the exact stats or the exact years right, but I think it was like 1980, where the number of confidants, the number of close friends that you could share anything with, was around 2, I think it was. And a few years ago, a similar study was done, and it's somewhere around 1.2 now. So it's nearly halved of people that you feel that you can share anything with. And I mean, there's a whole another conversation that we'll be able to have probably around this, but to summarize it, I think it is going to become so much more paramount to our health and well-being to nurture the relationships and nurture the friendships and deepen the connections that we have with ourselves and with each other. Because if we don't, and we utilize vices that you shared earlier, and those vices become robots, for example, sex robots would be another example from a relationship standpoint, where we actually have a relationship with something like that, which doesn't argue, which doesn't teach us how to have critical conversations and things like that. Again, it's a huge proponent for technology, and that level of intentionality that we've got to bring to it is going to become even more important as we're exposed to new, ever-changing pieces of technology.
The ever reliance upon that stuff and the amount of time that people spend on it now, the newer generations and the criticality of how they live their lives through social media, I think it is dangerous, too strong of a word. I probably sound old if I say that word, but I believe that genuine, real, authentic content and people will stand out more than those that are fictitiously creating. And I had a client recently say something to me about, are we losing our voice because of the fact that AI generated content insight can make us sound smarter or some certain way? And I believe the same thing that you. The technology is going to continue to get better and better and better and better. There will be more and more things that we as human beings that we don't want to do won't have to do. But when it comes down to real, authentic things in life, I think as a result, we're going as a society getting worse at it. We will get worse at critical conversations. We'll get worse at relationships that are difficult because everything's meant to be easy and simple and immediate gratification. And this perception that Cameron Atlas is this way, when in reality, it's something different. It's a house of cards in some regards that will come tumbling down.
Yeah, there was a study that I think it was some researchers out of MIT fairly recently. I'm pretty sure it came out this year. A study on, it was university students, of them doing an essay on their own, them doing an essay with the help of Google, and then them doing an essay with the help of ChatGPT. Glaringly obvious was the inability to be able to remember the content that was crafted in the essay in the ChatGPT group by far. And so there's a memory component, but there is the ability to be able to think through and the ability to be able to determine and think critically, to determine why we think a certain way. The using of aids is great, and we utilize different forms of AI for a lot of different things within the business. And there's something to be said for being able to work through a problem, right? Being able to work through a challenging situation. You said at the start that there's not a roadmap, for grief and working through the things that we've got to work through. And it is, everything is different. Do you have, though, some thoughts around, if we were to maybe put this into a few key steps, that if someone was going through, if you were having a similar situation occur that happened with your father-in-law passing away, your parents passing away, what are the things that someone could do, or what are the things that you would do differently or do the same to work through that? Is there kind of some steps that you can think through that if someone listening into this is going through that could actually go, all right, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and let's see where I go from there?
A couple things stand out. Number one would be to give yourself grace, because whatever you're dealing with, and those examples you gave were tremendous hardships, and I know were very difficult for me and my family to navigate through. And giving yourself grace in those around you that are experiencing that same thing. The other major thing, which is kind of sort of hard, is exploring and examining your own feelings and emotions that you're feeling in that situation that are coming up. I'll give a shout out to Mark Brackett, the author of Permission to Feel. He has this very simple ruler method, which is recognize, understand, label, express, regulate your emotions. So the criticality of being able to write down what you're feeling and understand why you're feeling that way, and then express them and regulate them in a productive manner. You didn't hear the word control, so you can't control your emotions. It was just a formula for just spotting how am I feeling and documenting it and seeing if it continues as a repeated behavior. The last thing I would suggest after grace and leaning into your emotions is getting some form of help. I mean, we mentioned this earlier about the 10,000 hour rule. You talked about no one gets to any sort of level of great success without having someone help them. And I think in this particular case, there's no more important time for you to lean in and get help, whether it's from a loved one, someone with compassion and empathy, it's a trained professional, whatever the case might be, to create a safe place for you to express how you're feeling, and then at the appropriate time, put together strategies for you to be able to slowly navigate your way to the other end of that grief. And I will attest, I still miss my parents every single day. The grief still exist, but it's not like it was when it first happened. This too shall pass is another cliche. And I think, again, giving yourself grace, recognizing how you're feeling, being in tune with yourself, and then getting help would be the reflective advice that I would give a younger version of myself going through that type of hardship.
They're great 4 pieces there. The thing that you mentioned right at the end there, slowly navigating your way through. It's not a race, there's lessons to be learned in the messiness, in the middle of hardship and challenge and setback. And if you race through, that's one, it's just going to get pushed down underneath the surface, and you're going to have to come and deal with it at some stage in the future. It's going to rear its ugly head in some way, shape, or form that's going to be, probably have a negative impact on some part of your life in the future. And so working through it, honoring the experience that you're having. And there was somebody that I heard, I can't remember who this was, shared it in a way of, especially when losing somebody, is that when you feel those feelings, it's not about pushing them away. It's enabling you to see how much you love them, how much you appreciated them, how much you respected them, how much they meant to you. And that's something to be felt and celebrated in a way.
I think so. I think I'm just watching you as you share your heart and your words, and your mic has the Edge of Possibility podcast. I just think to myself, think about what would be possible if you ran toward these challenges, these hardships, these difficulties. If you immersed yourself into them, you didn't brush them off or not deal with them, you're missing out on a new, better version of you at the end of the day. And I think the point of what you're trying to do, at least my perception, Cameron, is to get people to realize that there is beauty in these things that happen in our life, and you are capable of achieving things you never thought were possible. And think about the admiration that a firefighter gets while everybody's running out of a burning building, they're running in toward it. And I'll never compare what I do to anything like that, but working on yourself and dealing with things in your life that are difficult feels like that at times. Like this is a burning building I'm about to jump into emotionally. And I know the person is going to receive this feedback well, or I don't think this conversation, again, that story you tell yourself and your ability to pivot your brain to say, I'm not going fight or flight here. I'm just leaning right into it. And I'm going to be as prepared as possible because I know, A, it's going to be wildly entertaining. I'm going to feel things. And secondarily, I'm going to figure out where someone stands about something that I don't really know. And then I can synthesize that information and move on. I think that's beautiful, in my opinion.
The growth we just go through with this. I have it on my wall where I have my belief set up. I come out of situations stronger than before. Right? And this came from a moment a number of years ago where I shared with a friend just how challenging what I was going through was. And she just said to me, you always come out stronger than before. And I was like, oh, but you don't understand. So I just wanted sharing all these things, and this is going on and this is going on. And I got off the call and I thought, you know what? She's right. She's right. And often and usually, and the examples you've shared, you've come out stronger than before. You come out a more remarkable version of yourself. And so I think it's fantastic how you've gone about dealing with this. And it hasn't been perfect, not even close, right? As it isn't for any of us. We just try to navigate our way through these challenges the best we possibly can. And I think those 4 examples, those 4 things that people could do is really going to be helpful. We have a rapid fire segment here on the show called Your Edge, and we're going to walk through your values, your beliefs, and habits. What would you say your number 1 value is and why?
It's a toss up, but I'll start with make an impact. Make an impact guides me with everything that I do, and it makes decision-making way easier. And it allows me to be clear about where I'm going to spend my time and who I'm going to spend it with.
I love that. What about beliefs? So a core belief that's really shaped who you've become? This could be a belief that you have about yourself. It could be a belief about the world. It could be a belief about yourself, about others. What's a core belief that's really shaped who you've become?
I'll go back to that verse, Luke 22:42. Not my will, but yours be done. The moment that I embraced that and realized it, that there are certain things that I can control and certain things that I cannot. And the things that I cannot, the more that I let them be, let them work their way out the way they're supposed to do in society or belief system, whatever the case is, it changed me, man. There's no doubt about it. I'll give you, this is a corny example of it, but it relates to me specifically, is that I used to care a lot and identify with the scores I would shoot as a golfer. I'm a +2 handicap. If I shoot 4 over par, people are going to think less of me. You're not that good, this, that, and I would be telling myself these stories in the middle of the round, Cameron, not even enjoying the experience of beautiful sunny skies and green grass and with my friends. And then I saw this young man win a professional golf tournament as a amateur. Nick Dunlop, shout out to you, Nick, a couple years ago, interviewed after he made an 8-foot putt to win a professional tournament as an amateur. And they asked him, how did you deal with the pressure? And he said, on the very first hole, I knew the outcome of this tournament was already predetermined. What I was going to shoot was already decided. It was going to be either 66 or 76 or something in between. And I was just there to go try my best and have a good time. And I thought, wow, isn't that a great way to look at golf and then life? So not my will, yours be done.
Very cool. Very cool. How about a habit, ritual, or routine that you can't live without? This could be on a daily basis. It could be something you do once a year. What's something that's been really impactful for you?
2 things, same thing. Start my day every single day with my steel cut oats, peanut butter, a little protein powder, almond milk, almonds, and blueberries. Is that specific enough for you?
That's very specific.
That's the way that I start
it.
my day. Having good nutrition and diet, that's a big part of who I am. And then I make a commitment to at least have 30 minutes of some form of exercise in my life. And I start and end my day with meditation. Start it always with full meditation. I may not end it when I go to bed with meditation because I probably at times put myself to sleep. But what I eat, how I treat my body, and how I treat my mind are really important to me. And those 3 habits are something I do almost every single day.
There's really good conversation here today. Where can people find out more? Whether it's your books or HR Like a Boss community, fill us in.
Well, before I do that, Cameron, I got to tell you, this was real. This was fun. This was hard. I appreciate the fact that Sarah Radford made our connection almost a year ago. You having been a guest on my podcast, as I'm sitting here thinking I'm going to refer you to a conference organizer to potentially do a keynote. But the simplest way to get a hold of me is you can find me on LinkedIn. It's a very difficult last name to spell, but John Bernatovicz. John@willory.com is my email. And you can also learn about our community at hrlikeaboss.com.
Nice. We'll have everything listed in the show notes as well, making sure that that's all there and that people can have that. That'll be at CameronAtlas.com/podcast. John, great to have you on the show, my man.
Cheers. Adios. Yeah. Hello. And thank you. A sincerest thank you, Cameron. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. It's been an absolute pleasure. And as mentioned, we'll link to everything that was mentioned in the show notes at CameronAtlas.com/podcast. We have some great new guests coming up on the show. So make sure you hit follow, leave a comment. And until next time, go and write the next line in your story. It could be a giant leap, but it could also be a single moment of clarity, a bold decision, or a daily act of discipline that takes you beyond what's comfortable. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on The Edge of Possible.